Emma Caldwell's last known evening began like any other. She had spent a cozy night at her best friend's apartment, watching old movies and sharing snacks. It was a normal Friday, the kind that made you feel safe in a small town like Millfield. At around 9 p.m., she left the apartment, politely declining an offer to stay the night. The streets were quiet, the summer air still warm, and she started her familiar walk home. Emma lived only 15 minutes away. Her path took her past a bakery, a closed florist shop, and a row of quiet houses. Everything seemed calm, just like it always had. At 9:23 p.m., Emma made a quick phone call to her sister. The call lasted less than a minute. She said she was heading home and everything was fine. There was nothing unusual in her voice, no signs of fear or distress. Her sister thought nothing of it at the time. But it would turn out to be the final contact anyone had with Emma. She never arrived home that night. The next morning, her bed was untouched, her phone was off, and she hadn't messaged anyone. At first, her family thought she might have changed plans and stayed out. But by the evening, they sensed something was deeply wrong. When the police were contacted, they began to trace her movements. Neighbors hadn't seen or heard anything suspicious. Her last phone signal pinged near the bakery she had walked past. There were no signs of a struggle, no dropped belongings, no witness reports of screams or strange vehicles. It was as though she had vanished into the air. What began as a peaceful Friday evening was now the start of a terrifying mystery, one that would shake the entire community and reveal the darkest secrets hidden in plain sight. The police wasted no time in launching a full search operation. They combed the streets Emma would have walked that night, interviewed residents, and reviewed any available security footage. Cameras from the bakery confirmed Emma had passed by at 9:17 p.m., casually walking with her phone in one hand and a small bag in the other. But after that point, no camera captured her again. It was as if she had simply disappeared beyond that block. Volunteers joined in, scouring the wooded areas nearby and the riverbank that ran along the edge of town. Drones were flown over the area, and divers were brought in to check the river. Still, there was nothing, no sign of a struggle, no dropped belongings, and no clothing found in the woods. With each day that passed, the community grew more anxious. Flyers with Emma's face were taped to lampposts, shared online, and posted in store windows. Her disappearance didn't make sense. She had no history of running away, no troubling relationships, and no known enemies. It wasn't until day 5 that the first potential lead came in. A man named Harvey Collins called the police to report something he had seen on the night Emma disappeared. He was driving home from a late shift and noticed a white van pulled over near an old, abandoned gas station just a few blocks from Emma's route. He hadn't thought much of it until the news spread. He remembered seeing a girl standing next to the van, possibly talking to the driver. The police took the tip seriously. The location matched the last known direction Emma had been walking. But there were no working cameras at the gas station, and the van was gone. Investigators now had a lead, but also a chilling question: who was in that van, and why had Emma never made it home? 3 months after Emma's disappearance, the case had grown cold. Leads had dried up, searches had stopped, and the community slowly returned to its normal rhythm, though a quiet unease lingered. Then, out of nowhere, a storage facility manager in a nearby town contacted police. One of their units had been auctioned off due to months of unpaid rent. The new renter had found strange items inside: a dusty flip phone, a woman's scarf, and an old newspaper clipping about Emma's case. Everything was neatly stored in a small cardboard box, almost like someone had preserved them intentionally. Police immediately seized the contents. Forensic testing confirmed the scarf belonged to Emma. Her DNA was on it. The flip phone, although not hers, was still functional after charging. The call history had been wiped clean, but data recovery experts managed to restore one file, a short audio recording. It was faint, mostly static, but in the background was the sound of a female voice saying something barely audible. Investigators believed it was Emma's voice, though they couldn't confirm it. The storage unit was registered to a man named Thomas Greer. He lived in a small town about 30 miles away. When questioned, he acted surprised and claimed he had rented the unit years ago but hadn't used it in a long time. He denied knowing anything about the items found inside and said it must have been someone else who left them there. Police dug deeper into his background and discovered something unsettling. Years ago, Greer had lived in Millfield and had worked as a janitor at the high school Emma attended. He left the town abruptly after being questioned in a separate missing persons case involving another young woman, also unsolved. Suddenly, the pieces were starting to connect in disturbing ways. Investigators intensified their focus on Thomas Greer, convinced that the contents of the storage unit were not coincidental. Digging into his past revealed a troubling pattern. He had lived in several small towns over the past 15 years, moving every few years without explanation. In each town, there had been reports of missing women, cases that had gone cold without leads. Greer had never been charged, but he had been questioned more than once. His quiet and unassuming demeanor had always kept him off the radar. Now, he was no longer just a name in a file, he was the center of a growing investigation. With a search warrant in hand, police entered Greer's home. It appeared ordinary at first glance, clean, modest, nothing out of place. But in the basement, hidden behind a false wall, they found a locked metal cabinet. Inside were dozens of labeled folders, each containing personal items, photographs, and handwritten notes. Some folders were marked only with dates and initials. One folder stood out, labeled with Emma's initials and the date of her disappearance. Inside was a photograph of her, clearly taken without her knowledge, from across the street on the night she vanished. Also in the cabinet was a cassette tape in a plastic case labeled with that same date. When played, the tape revealed disturbing audio, muffled footsteps, breathing, and the sound of a phone call ringing. A woman's voice, soft and nervous, was heard saying, "I'm almost home." Then the tape went silent. Investigators were horrified. It appeared Greer had followed her that night and recorded her last moments. The discovery was enough to arrest Greer. But despite hours of interrogation, he insisted he had never harmed Emma. He claimed he only observed and collected memories. His chilling words raised new fears. How many others had he followed, and how many more folders were yet to be discovered? With Thomas Greer in custody, investigators turned their attention to finding Emma's remains. Though he admitted to following her and collecting items, he refused to say what happened after that night. Search teams, guided by maps and notes found in his basement, began examining the wooded areas surrounding Millfield. They focused on locations referenced in his files, secluded spots marked with vague symbols. Still, no solid evidence emerged until a former co-worker came forward. He told police that years ago, Greer had mentioned an old, unused well deep in the woods, a place he claimed no one would ever look. The area was remote, overgrown, and far from any hiking trails. It took several days to locate the well, hidden beneath a collapsed wooden cover and tangled brush. When investigators lowered a camera into the darkness, they found what they had feared. Human remains were visible, along with scraps of clothing that matched the outfit Emma had worn on the night she vanished. The recovery took hours. Forensic teams later confirmed the remains belonged to Emma Caldwell. The discovery brought a mixture of heartbreak and relief to her family. They finally had answers, though the pain of loss remained. Thomas Greer was formally charged with Emma's murder, unlawful surveillance, and the suspected disappearances of 2 other women whose files had been found in his home. The media called him a serial predator hiding in plain sight, someone who watched from the shadows and left almost no trace. Emma's story shocked the nation. Her case led to renewed investigations into unsolved disappearances across several towns. Greer's trial exposed years of unnoticed patterns and missed warnings. Though justice was served, it came too late for Emma. Her voice had been silenced, but in the end, it helped bring a hidden monster into the light.